Clara stepped across the threshold, her footsteps echoing in the silent house. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the gloom. The air, thick with the scent of decay and old things, sent a shiver down her spine. This was her inheritance, her great-aunt Millie's grand Victorian mansion. It was beautiful, in a faded, forgotten way, with its ornate mouldings and sprawling rooms. But there was an undeniable eeriness that clung to the house like cobwebs. Clara wandered through the rooms, her fingers trailing along the dusty surfaces. Each room held the ghosts of memories, the echoes of lives lived and lost. In the grand dining room, she could almost hear the clatter of cutlery and the murmur of conversations long gone. In the parlour, she imagined ladies in fine gowns, sipping tea and gossiping. But it was the master bedroom that drew her, with its antique four-poster bed and a massive, ornately framed mirror that dominated one wall. The mirror was a thing of beauty and menace. Its silver backing was tarnished with age, and the glass was cloudy in places, distorting the reflection. Yet there was a strange allure to it, a pull that drew Clara closer. She stood before it, her breath catching in her throat as she saw her reflection, or rather, a distorted, almost ghostly version of herself staring back. There was something about that mirror that unsettled her, something that whispered of secrets and shadows. The house settled around Clara, a living, breathing entity. Floorboards creaked beneath her feet. The wind howled in the chimney, sounding eerily like a mournful cry. She couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following her every move. It was most pronounced in the bedroom, in the presence of the antique mirror. Clara found herself drawn to the mirror again and again, her gaze lingering on its aged surface. She couldn't explain it, but she felt a strange connection to it, a mixture of fear and fascination. At times she imagined she saw movement in the depths of the glass, fleeting shadows that vanished as quickly as they appeared. She told herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. The nights were the worst. The house groaned and sighed around her, each creak and groan setting her teeth on edge. Sleep came in fitful bursts, plagued by unsettling dreams of shadowy figures and disembodied whispers. And always, in her dreams, the mirror loomed large, its surface swirling with an unnatural mist. One night she awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was bathed in the pale light of the full moon, and the mirror seemed to gleam with an eerie luminescence. As she watched, mesmerized, she could have sworn she saw a figure take shape in the glass. It was gone in a heartbeat, but the image, fleeting as it was, sent a chill down her spine. It was the figure of a woman, her face obscured by shadow. But her eyes, those glowing, malevolent eyes, burned into Clara's memory. Days turned into weeks, and still the unsettling occurrences persisted. The feeling of being watched intensified, and Clara became increasingly convinced that she was not alone in the house. Objects moved inexplicably, lights flickered, and whispers seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. But it was the mirror that held the most terror for Clara. Its strange behavior grew more pronounced, fueling her fear. The delay in her reflection became more noticeable, as if some unseen force was holding her image captive for a fleeting moment each time. And then there was the smile. One evening, as Clara stood before the mirror, brushing her hair, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Her reflection smiled. But it wasn't her smile. It was a grotesque, twisted thing, full of malice and something else, something cold and inhuman that sent shivers down her spine. She whirled around, her heart pounding, but there was nothing there. The smile in the mirror vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Clara staring at her own terrified reflection. She tried to rationalize it, to tell herself it was just a trick of the light, a figment of her overactive imagination. But deep down she knew the truth. The mirror was not right. It was a portal, a conduit to something dark and sinister, and it was toying with her. Sleep became a distant memory. The whispers that had once been faint and indistinct grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the mirror, swirling around Clara, taunting her with their malice. They spoke of secrets, of pain and suffering, of a darkness that threatened to consume her. "Clara!" they hissed, her name a sibilant whisper that sent chills down her spine. "We know your secrets, your fears." The whispers were relentless, chipping away at her sanity. She tried to ignore them, to block them out, but they were always there, lurking at the edge of her awareness. They followed her from room to room, growing louder, more menacing whenever she dared to venture near the mirror. One night, driven to the brink by fear and exhaustion, Clara decided to confront the entity in the mirror. She stood before it, her body trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. The whispers reached a fever pitch, swirling around her like a vortex of madness. "Show yourself," she cried, her voice hoarse with fear and defiance. "What do you want from me?" For a moment there was silence. Then, slowly, the mirror began to cloud over, the reflection of the room behind her fading into a swirling mist. A cold dread gripped Clara's heart as she watched a figure begin to coalesce in the glass. The figure in the mirror solidified, resolving into the form of a woman. Her features were sharp and angular, her skin as pale as death. Her eyes, however, were what truly terrified Clara. They were cold and empty, like the eyes of a shark, devoid of any warmth or humanity. They seemed to pierce through Clara, seeing into the very depths of her soul. "You called?" The figure spoke, her voice a raspy whisper that seemed to claw its way up from the depths of Clara's nightmares. Clara stood her ground, her fear giving way to a strange sort of resolve. She had to know. She had to face the darkness that haunted her. "Who are you?" Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly. The figure in the mirror smiled, a slow, cruel stretching of her lips that sent shivers down Clara's spine. "This house is mine," the apparition hissed, her voice filled with a chilling possessiveness. "And you are in my way." The figure in the mirror lunged towards Clara, her image twisting grotesquely, her fingers stretching out like claws. Clara cried out and stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. The mirror hummed with a strange energy, and the air grew heavy, oppressive. "You will leave," the figure snarled, her voice echoing around Clara, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "This house is mine. You will leave or—" Fear threatened to overwhelm Clara, but she fought against it. She wouldn't let this control her. This house might belong to the spirit, but it was Clara's inheritance. More importantly, it was her only home. "I won't leave," Clara said, her voice surprisingly steady. "This house is mine now." The rage in the figure's eyes intensified. "You cannot defy me!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the house. The temperature plummeted, and the air crackled with a malevolent energy. "This mirror is mine. This house is mine." Clara knew she had to act fast. This entity, this trapped spirit, fed off fear. Clara had to fight back. But how could she possibly fight something trapped in a mirror? An idea, reckless and desperate, formed in Clara's mind. If the mirror was the source of the spirit's power, then destroying the mirror would sever its hold over the house. She looked around the room, her eyes falling upon a heavy silver hairbrush lying on the vanity. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. "You've tormented this family long enough," Clara said, picking up the hairbrush. Her voice shook with a mixture of fear and determination. "It's time to let go." The figure in the mirror let out an ear-splitting shriek. "No, you can't!" Section 7. Shattered Silence. Clara didn't hesitate. She raised the heavy silver hairbrush and hurled it at the mirror with all her might. The hairbrush met the glass with a deafening crash. The mirror shattered, splintering into 1,000 pieces, each shard reflecting the terrified face of the entity trapped within. The house seemed to hold its breath for a moment, an eerie silence descending upon the room. Then, a wave of energy like a shockwave blasted through the house. Clara shielded her eyes from the shards of glass flying through the air. The air, which had been thick with a malevolent energy only moments before, suddenly felt lighter, cleaner. The whispers ceased abruptly, leaving behind an almost deafening silence. Clara stared at the shattered remains of the mirror, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure was gone, banished, back to whatever dark corner of the world it had come from. Section 8. A Lingering Presence. As the dust settled and Clara caught her breath, a sense of relief washed over her. The oppressive atmosphere that had permeated the house for weeks had lifted. The whispers were gone, the air no longer crackling with unseen energy. She cautiously approached the wreckage of the mirror, careful to avoid stepping on the shards of glass. Kneeling down, she picked up a large piece, the silver backing tarnished with age. The reflection staring back at her was her own, no longer distorted, no longer haunted. Clara took a deep breath, the air filling her lungs with the sweet scent of freedom, but her relief was tinged with a lingering unease. The house, though quieter, didn't feel entirely empty. She couldn't shake the feeling that something remained, a faint echo of the entity's presence lurking somewhere in the shadows. The house was hers now, of that she was certain. But she also knew that some things, once invited in, are not so easily forgotten. Section 9. Moving Forward. The days that followed were filled with a strange mix of peace and unease. Clara set about restoring the old house, each swing of the hammer, each sweep of the broom, a cathartic act of reclaiming her space. She replaced the shattered mirror with a painting, a vibrant landscape that brought light and life to the once shadowed room. The house, bathed in the warmth of the returning sun, no longer felt oppressive. It felt like a home. But there were moments, fleeting and indistinct, when Clara could have sworn she felt a cold draught, a whisper of movement just at the edge of her vision. She would turn, expecting to see something, but there was never anything there. Clara kept a single shard of the shattered mirror on her nightstand, a reminder of the darkness she had faced and overcome. It was a tangible symbol of her own strength, a talisman against the unseen forces that lurked in the shadows. Section 10. The Final Glance. Years later, Clara stood in the doorway of the bedroom, her gaze drawn to the spot where the mirror had once stood. The house was filled with laughter and light, the echoes of the past replaced by the joy of the present. As she looked around the room, she noticed something she hadn't seen before, a faint shimmer, a distortion of the air where the mirror used to hang. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Clara felt a chill run down her spine, but it wasn't entirely unpleasant. It was a reminder that the world held mysteries beyond our understanding, that some doors, once opened, could never be fully closed. She smiled, a touch of sadness mixed with acceptance. Some things, she realized, were destined to remain unseen. Their presence felt only in the quiet spaces between heartbeats. And so, with a final glance at the spot where the mirror had once stood, Clara turned and walked away, leaving the shadows to their secrets. The house was at peace, but the memory of the haunted mirror and the chilling encounter it held would remain with Clara always, a whisper in the back of her mind, a shiver in the stillness of the night.